Dunia Group is a 2 billion dirham finance company that lends money to retail consumers and companies across the UAE. This week, it reported a sixth consecutive year of profit, but earnings were down sharply from last year amid what CEO Rajeev Kakar describes as, quote, challenging conditions. He joins us in the studio now. Rajeev, good morning. Nice to see you again. Welcome back. So, sixth consecutive year of profitability, but profit was down. Glass half full or half empty for you?
Well, I'm always an optimist, so I would say glass half full, and perhaps we'll get fuller ahead. And I guess these have been challenging times, and it was pretty logical with a large part of the market and a large part of our target customers being impacted by the consolidation that we're seeing in the market, which is very positive as a development because it structurally makes the market even stronger ahead. Led to an obvious impact in us needing to increase our provisions and be able to give more time to our clients to be able to pay back.
So this is looking at this, that was the explanation that sprung to me. 2015, you had 251 million dirhams of profit. Last year, 73 million dirhams of profit. That's essentially provisioning for bad debts among your corporate customers and retail consumers.
That's right. It's provisioning for weak debts. I wouldn't really call them bad because these are provisions against assets that we believe will pay back to us in the future. But at this point in time, it's the right thing to do because many of our customers are severely impaired and impacted themselves. And it's important for us to give them time to be able to pay us back.
Where are you seeing the pain at the moment? Is it mainly in the retail portfolio or the corporate loans?
Well, Richard, in some ways, the pain that you see is across the system. And in some ways, it gets generated from the top because when large companies need to consolidate, there is an obvious impact down the chain in the entire chain of commercial as well as SME. And
when you say consolidate, you mean things like downsize, get rid of staff, that kind of thing?
Well, I wouldn't go as drastic as deliberate downsizing of staff, but when you're downsizing against an obvious spends which may not end up fructifying as envisaged in the past or as envisaged at the same speed as what it was originally planned at, there is an obvious excess capacity in the system. And as that capacity tends to readjust itself, some of it leads to shedding, some of it leads to readjustments, there is an obvious impact on the earning capability of the clients.
We saw quite bullish comments yesterday from the chairman of Dubai, or 2 days ago, from the chairman of Dubai Islamic Bank when they reported their earnings. They had a modest increase in earnings. And it's Mohammed Al-Shabani, who's the chairman there, who's also the head of Investment Corporation of Dubai, a very senior figure within Dubai government. And he said we've seen the UAE economy stabilise in the first quarter of this year. Oil prices have stabilised and government spending is up. Are you seeing a corner being turned in the first 3 months of this year, Rajeev?
Well, I can see green shoots of recovery in the market, and I guess there is a fair bit of stabilization. It's hard to predict these things because the impact of change is often very distant from the time the impact gets seen at the positive end. It is heartening for even when I did hear that and read the comments made by him, it is very heartening to hear that because the impact that comes as a result of stabilization seen at the top has an obvious positive impact downstream. And being at the segment that gets impacted the first on adverse situations, and often we tend to also be a lead indicator when confidence seems to actually start coming in. We should start seeing the impact typically. If this recovery is indeed going to be holding ground, we should start seeing the impact down the line.
What does that mean in terms of your willingness to lend to some of the smaller, newer companies? I mean, I know the Dubai government's been very big on encouraging institutions such as yourselves to lend to SMEs. But some of the companies that don't quite qualify yet as SMEs that come into this studio, a lot of startups or those in their first 1 or 2 years of trading, so they find it very tricky. What's your policies on that?
I think that's an interesting question. You're talking to someone who has set up a company himself. And I do understand what it means for an entrepreneur to be able to reach out and get finances and credit to be able to grow. So one of the things that we do focus as a company that focuses on empowering, enabling success, empowering people and enriching lives is to focus on what we call the self-employed mass market, or in some ways the seed stage businesses that are hopefully some of them would grow up to become SMEs or commercial low-end businesses or eventually even much larger businesses. So we do look at alternate ways of assessing their credit. We look at alternate ways of assessing their business models, but a lot of focus goes behind the individuals that make it possible. So our focus is a lot on the individuals that make businesses possible. because we do believe that while companies may flourish, people may do, companies may do well or may fail, it's eventually the power of the entrepreneur behind it, or the conviction and the passion of the people behind it who run the businesses that will lead to success.
Could you tell me quickly what you mean by alternate ways? What other ways would you assess a startup?
Well, we follow a very traditional method, which I guess several bankers sometimes forget, which is following the 5 C's of credit. So when it comes to lending, you do have to look at the capacity, the character, the collateral, and the capital of the customer. And needless to say, the 5th C is the covenants that determine the kind of contract you create between the client and yourself. So the task lies in being able to establish the credentials, credit credentials, and the ability to pay, as well as the intent to pay of such clients.
Finally, Rajeev, we've been talking to you as Rajeev Kakar, the banker, but now let's talk to you as Rajeev Kakar, the entrepreneur. You set up Dunia, what was it, 8 years ago now?
Well, we started working on it 11 years ago.
But you're an ex-Citibank banker, then
right.
You worked for Temasek, the big Singapore
That's
sovereign
right.
wealth fund, and you set up Dunia, let's say a decade or so ago, with backing from Temasek and Mubadala, the sovereign wealth funds are your big backers. Where do you go from here? You've built it so far into a 2 billion dirham business, 2 billion dirhams of assets. You grew very quickly to hit that point. Now your assets are stabilizing. What's next for Dunia, Rajeev?
Richard, interesting. I guess we haven't achieved a lot of what we really want to achieve in Dunia. Dunia means the world, so obviously we do want to look at different ways of growing, and we've gone through an intense process of understanding how we want to build up this business, because we do wish to amplify our efforts and bring the benefit of what we offer to clients at a much wider base. And we do have a three-pronged approach to our growth ahead. One is very clearly of scoping up our business much more, which is doing more things to the existing customers that we serve in the market in the UAE. A second priority is to look at ways of scaling up what we've done very successfully in the UAE to other markets around in the adjacent countries. So adjacency is another element of our growth that we will look at. And finally, of course, what we need to do is keep pace with the evolving technologies and the evolving opportunities in the world, and which is really transforming from the core. We're very clear we'd like to grow outward from the core, but we'd like to build out more on the social media, mobility, analytics, and cloud solutions, which I think are increasingly offering new opportunities for us.
Fascinating stuff, Rajeev Kakar. Appreciate you joining us this morning, Managing Director and CEO of Dunia Group.
Thank you.
This is the Business Breakfast on Dubai Eye 103.8.